All right, here we go. Automatically combining the parallels blurs its distinctives. In other words, you cannot just combine or just say, you cannot say, okay, because Mark and Luke, they wrote this, Mark, Luke, John, and Matthew, they all wrote about the feeding of the 5,000, so we can just say, okay, that's just one thing, and so we don't have to worry about it, right? You gotta consider each account, because at the end of the day, they're going to reveal some stuff that we didn't catch before, but it gives you the whole story. Watch this, and we're going to actually do that passage in this class today. Okay?
All right.
I'm rushing to get to it. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. So we are looking then reading horizontally and vertically, continuing. Vertically, the genre consists of the message that God was at work in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, effecting his promise found in Scripture. Go back and read what it said, the first point on horizontal, please, somebody.
Disallows or the teachings? Horizontal.
The very first bullet point on horizontal.
Okay.
Horizontal.
The teachings and action of Jesus occur in more than This allows the interpreter to read and think across the passage and compare the ways in which different gospel writers treats a certain passage.
Is that the first bullet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. That's horizontal, right?
Yes.
And so vertical, what? The genre consists of a message that Jesus was at work in, God was at work in Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, effecting his promise found in the Scripture. That's important. That's where we start. Watch this. Doesn't give you much more than that. You notice that? Wasn't that cool? Thinking vertically should take priority over thinking horizontally.
Okay.
That's ginormous. Why? Why do you think that's
Like when you're praying to God, when you're praying and you're on your knees and you're talking to God, because God opened the path, Jesus opened that for us when he died on the cross, that we can vertically pray to God, so it's more important.
Okay.
That's one viewpoint. But.
Okay. Okay. That's the essence of this. And watch this. And we get that when we're praying, but we don't get that when we're studying. See, we get that when we're praying, but when we study, we don't get that. Watch this. Because when we're studying, we kind of like, we do it horizontally.
Yeah.
That's why he makes the thing vertically should take priority over thinking horizontally, because horizontally is us to us. So what we end up doing, we end up putting Jesus down here. And since we say Jesus is God, then we end up putting God down here. And then watch this, and so as we start dealing and studying, we start dealing with God like he wants us. That's bad news. And watch this, and our application flows out of that as well. Right? That's why we can say, I can rebuke the devil and yada yada, we go with all that little crazy stuff. And not only that, watch this, I can speak it into existence. Why? Because we think that we're on the same part. I'm sorry, time out. When we're reading the gospel message, we have to read it and interpret it horizontally. I mean vertically. Not horizontally, right? You need both, because application again is horizontal.
Yeah.
But interpretation, we got to start with the vertical approach, and that will help us to see the import of the truth of the gospel. Because after all, what is the gospel? It's a combination of what? The and he. That's y'all clue.
Theology and
Hit.
history.
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, what?
I'm gonna be testing y'all on this. I wanted to sink in. I want to sink in because these things are critical as we continue to move forward.
Right?
Yeah. It's the gospel is a combination of history and theology, or theology and history. Yes. What God was doing. Yes.
My handout doesn't have that page. It stops at horizontally. I don't have it vertically.
Combination of history.
You don't have a vertical?
Theology.
No, it stops here horizontally, but it doesn't go to vertically.
Okay. It's a good thing I brought an extra copy. Get us Rory. I want you to have everything. I'm gonna clean this up for you guys, and we're gonna have one big book, right?
Cool.
Before, when I tried, since I've started trying to do the 10 weeks and be done with it kind of thing, I started chopping it up. But I'm gonna go back to the old format where I have one book with everything in it. Everybody has the same thing, okay?
Okay.
All right, so, let's keep it moving. Anytime somebody reads.
Any passage in the gospel should be interpreted in light of the overall structure and themes of that gospel, despite the nature of any parallel accounts that appear in other gospels.
It's kind of repeating that, but again, it's critical that we get that. Okay.
The distinctive emphasis emphasizes, the distinctive emphasis each evangelist has is best seen in those portions of scripture that he has chosen to record.
Right, because everybody don't record the same things.
Right, right.
Got it?
Right.
Okay.
Right, there are very few passages that, very few passages that are like the, feeding of the 5,000 that go across all 4 gospels. You know, some passages are in 2 gospels, some's in 3 gospels, but rarely do we see passages that go across 4 gospels. Feeding of the 5,000 is the one that comes to mind, it's the one we'll be doing, and your challenge is to go and try to find others. Okay, that's good cross-reference Bible helps you with that, right?
Cool.
Because it'll just show you where this passage is or where it's alluded to. Okay. All right, interpretation application, somebody.
Interpretation and application of a given passage in the Gospels should stress the particular emphasis of the Gospel in which the passage occurs.
Okay, and this will make sense in a second, okay? If it doesn't right now, because again, the emphasis of the writer is critical. Okay, what is he emphasizing? Who's he writing to? That kind of thing. And what's the point, right? How does he see Jesus? Going back to this vertical piece, understanding always that the genre consists of the message of God, that God was at work in Jesus, life, death, and resurrection, effecting his promise found in Scripture. And what was his promise? What was his promise?
To come back.
To redeem mankind back to himself. Right? That's the remember, go back to the meta narrative, remember the whole thing, right?
Whole thing, yeah.
Right? God created, man fell, God redeemed, and Jesus coming back again to judge, right? So that's the meta narrative. So again, when we think vertically, when we're thinking vertically and when we're interpreting as we go through the passage, then guess what happens? Then we kind of keep that in the forefront of our mind, and we don't go off on rabbit trails, right?
So, question, how important is it to understand the author?
It's critical, absolutely critical. And we're going to do that in a minute, but it's absolutely critical. Matthew, for example, who's Matthew? Who's Matthew?
Tax collector.
Tax collector. But what was his ethnicity? He was Jewish, right? How about Mark? Who was Mark? He's the guy that Paul kicked to the curb and said, you ain't going with me because you went back home and do your thing, right? But he was also Jewish. But his emphasis wasn't from the same emphasis as I'm doing that slide. We're gonna do this slide later, okay? Okay? I don't want to mess up my stuff before we get there, right? But again, and then you have Luke and then you have John, and they all have different relationships with Jesus. They all have different perspectives in life, and so when they write, it's important that we understand that, because then it helps us to explain why they included certain selections and things to record versus the other authors who did not.